Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Airspeed's Korra Rewatch video. This one's for K409 Beyond the Wilds, which is, I think, one of the more memorable, one of the better episodes from Book 4. It's not perfect though, which in a way kind of surprised me watching it again, but I think it's pretty clear, I suppose, where the problems are, for me at least. Janora's treatment in this episode I don't think is particularly good, and it kind of is a general Book 4 thing, as we've gotten into a few times and still have to get into. Korra's recovery, while I think being obviously what this episode is remembered for, kind of confuses the issue. In terms of the specifics, the technicalities of what exactly is happening with her recovery in episode 4 versus her recovery here. What's the difference? Why did one thing happen before the other, and so on? Why did this happen, then that happen? We'll get into it. Otherwise, I think pretty solid setup episode, as Bolin and Varric return to the city. They inform everyone about the Spirit Vine plan. The defense of the city is formed. It's like a preparation for the finale type stuff. And we're not quite fully prepared, but this gets stuff into position. Asami and Varric working together now to help defend the city. Bolin going on the mission with Lin and Opal. It covers a decent amount of ground, but for sure the core of this episode is Korra's recovery. So I'll start with Bolin's arc here, and it's definitely, I think, a good section of the episode. This is something you needed to cover, and I think it is probably the best done relationship kind of drama stuff in the show, with regards to okay, here's two characters on the verge of kind of breaking up. They've sort of had a separation. They haven't specifically broken up with each other, but just they've been separated by their jobs, and it kind of feels like a kind of not said breakup has more or less happened, and how that reunion is going to come into place. I think this Bolin Opal one is actually pretty well done, because it's clear that they do care for each other, and they sort of build in a way on both sides towards the recovery. So I think it is quite well done. Bolin's return is it's fine. Again, a lot of the returning characters who've been kind of out for a while, they don't get the best reunions, and this one once again isn't the best. It's a nice one with Mako. He kind of apologizes for what's happened. Korra Bolin doesn't really get all that much of a kind of reaction. Asami is kind of separate in this episode, just so she's not really involved in the reunion as well, which is sort of a separate point with this episode, but it feels like this is sort of an episode I feel Asami should have been involved with her friends in as well. I'm very shocked, given the direction that they take with Asami at the end of the series, that she wasn't there for the reunion with Bolin, and she wasn't in really any way involved with helping Korra's final stage of recovery. It kind of feels weird, given that that's the direction that Mako's the one to go with her to the prison instead of Asami. Mako, I think, makes sense, but if the one in most needed development is the relationship with Asami, so why wasn't that the case? And it's just an example of okay, they needed her in this other side of the story, but the character stuff to me is where obviously it's a little more lacking, and so switching things around a bit could have helped. But yeah, with Bolin, he immediately tries to kind of apologize to Opal, and it's clear that he obviously knows he's in the wrong, hence why he apologizes to Mako for everything. He feels the need to kind of redeem himself, apologize to everyone for choosing the wrong side, and now coming back, he has to do everything he can to get back in their good books. Opal, especially because, as he says, basically he sort of, in a way, reveals the magnitude of it to himself as he's saying it to her. He sort of, in a way, assisted in her family getting captured, her home getting taken, Kuvira taking over the world. That's a huge amount that he has to, basically get back on the good books with. And you can see that the problem throughout this episode is that Opal is focused on her family and getting them back, fixing I suppose the major problems that are going on now. She's not really overly focused on the romance type stuff at the moment, because in a way, why would you be? And that's why the Pabu, I've broken my legs, the picnic feels like such a kind of tone deaf thing from Bolin of just like, really? Like, you've literally just told her about all of these problems and you're doing a picnic. Like, priorities? So it's sort of development that needs to happen to sort of show Bolin that, like, this isn't just a case of, like, it's a little issue that you're going to have to get over. You actually have to do something to really kind of gain her trust back. And that's why I suppose the final scene works so well, because you just have him come out not really knowing exactly what to do, but just kind of saying that, like, I really care about you. He says the I love you, which I suppose hits hard because you could tell it's potentially the first time in the relationship that this has been said. And she's annoyed. It's the scene that gets across that she still cares. Like, she's been very kind of angry, like, rightfully so for most of the previous part of the episode. But here's the moment where you can sort of see that does mean a lot to her, that she's still invested in this relationship, but she has to get through getting her family back before she can even address what's happening with the relationship. And Bolin just kind of offers to do anything to make this happen, and this is where he obviously gets included in the mission, and it's the perfect chance for him to redeem himself. He's going back to, in a way, help them fight Kuvira, get everyone out, and it makes sense as well because he has to sort of redeem himself with the whole Beifong family. So him assisting with the rescue is the perfect way to do that, because we specifically showed him, almost trying to negotiate with Su to sign over Zaofu to Kuvira. We saw the displeasure from Wei and Wing, and in that sense, it is very solid setup in that he's going to have to encounter a lot of people who are going to be fairly annoyed with him, and how big of a gesture is he going to have to do to sort of fix all of that. And I like the complexity they add in with the whole, like, Zhu Li coming back into play, and how Bolin kind of deals with that, and that really being the, suppose, in a way, like, thing that convinces Opal that she can forgive Bolin. But I think solid setup with just the idea that the world leaders previously in the episode had decided that they weren't going to actively go after or, like, attack Kuvira. Interesting enough world leader meeting here. Like, Wu's there, Raiko's there, Tenzin and Izumi. Obviously I guess the water tribes were too far away to get there on time. Sort of makes sense. I wonder, has Izumi just been here the whole time since the coronation? I think that's the implication, more or less. But I liked it. We got Izumi's, like, only real notable scene in the series of just her saying that the Fire Nations participated in too many kind of unnecessary wars. They won't participate in another. But when Raiko kind of changes from all-out attack to just, we'll shore up the city, we'll defend, she offers help on that front. It's a nice little hint of, like, okay, there's her character a little bit. But it's such a disappointment with Korra that we never, ever got to see the Fire Nation. And that's the thing with the comics. Like, Turf Wars is, like, alright, but it's not what we really want. We really want to go see the Fire Nation, regardless of what the plot is. We just want to see what it's like, see what the royal family is like, meet Izumi's daughter, do whatever plot you need to do, but just get to know what happened with that family a little bit more. What's going on with the dragons, learn about Fire Nation stuff, because they sort of kept it hidden here. They teased it a few times. Here it's kind of teased with Izumi, but we still never really get to see it. So that's something I hope they really do hit on in the future, because it is what everyone does really, really want. It's a common complaint I see that we never went to the Fire Nation. And it's weird because it seems like, by all accounts, a plot point involving going to the Fire Nation where we got to see some of it was on the cards for book 4 before they kind of, I suppose, tightened it up. Maybe that's when the budget cut came in and they had to lower it by an episode, so they potentially had to simplify the story, and the whole Fire Nation stuff got cut. Not sure exactly. The little they've said about it gets the impression that Mako's subplot outside of Wu would have been with starting a relationship with Izumi's daughter, or at least meeting her and suggesting that relationship, which I think would have really been this perfect thing to have, but maybe that can happen at a later point now. So yeah, just okay, they're going to defend, and Raiko makes another move to have Varric and Asami work together to work on the defenses, basically some sort of counter to the Spirit Vine weapon, which makes sense. You address the history of Asami and Varric from book 2, which is nice. And their dynamic, I don't think it's the greatest, because in the end that arc was sort of more about Varric framing Mako rather than like anything specific about his relationship with Asami. But it's a nice callback that's going to eventually lead to like Hiroshi needing to be involved. That here's, in a way, two characters who are like missing a key person in their lives, and they build these two-person hummingbird suits. They're going to need a co-pilot, and for Asami it's Hiroshi, for Varric it's Yu Lee, and how do we get those people back into play? That's the setup here, which I do like. I think they give Asami her kind of last big moment with the death of Hiroshi. We'll get to it. But just a nice little thing to at least give Asami something, that they haven't forgot about her, kind of like they did in book 3, the end of book 2, like they did. So there's that. Anything else? I suppose it's around this time that we begin to get the setup for kind of Korra's arc in this episode. We obviously see like Ryu, the tour group, get captured by the Spirit Vines. Obviously the idea is that there's some level of like, this is them, the Spirit Vines, reacting to what Kuvira is doing in the swamp, that she's ruining the swamp, so the Spirit Vines are like attacking humans because of what happened, even though it is just Kuvira, and everyone else is just a victim. And Jinora gets captured, which, again, I think this is the big problem with this episode. Why does Jinora have to get captured? I get the idea that she has to get captured, and as she's being captured, project her spirit to tell Korra, and that's how Korra gets involved. Why couldn't Jinora have been the only one who escaped the Spirit Vines? And she's still, like, she can't resolve the problem herself, but still, everyone else is captured. But Jinora is, to some degree, involved in trying to figure out what's going on. I would have liked it if you had Jinora as more of a support position for Korra, where Korra is trying to convince everyone that she can do it, and Jinora has to be the backup, saying like look, like me and Korra are like the most spiritual people in the world. I can't do it right now. She can't do it, but I know she can. I think that's the role that Jinora should have played in this episode, rather than just kind of being captured and having to be saved again. Because again, like, this is the time when she has her tattoos. I just don't like that they don't give her a main role, and she's the spiritual one. I think there should have been some sense of her knowing how to deal with the counter the vines or something like that and get out, because she's the only master there, so her skills should have got her out of that situation. And I get maybe it is to promote the fact that Tenzin's worried, that he's worried about Jinora, so he wants to make sure it gets done, and that prompts the maybe not believing in Korra. But I just think it was the wrong character. Like, why couldn't that have been like Iki? Like, it would have still had the same effect, without, I think, diminishing a character who you've already set up as being so high, the only other Master Airbender in the world, and this is the use for the character. As for, I suppose, the setup for the arc, I think it's good, the idea that you've already had it set up in the previous episodes, that Korra is sort of dealing with this idea of she never came back to the city in the first place because she didn't want to return as the Avatar, but be this diminished Avatar who couldn't do anything. She's back to being close to 100%, but she is not capable of doing the things that she could in the past. And because of that, people are thinking that she's off, that you probably shouldn't contact Korra to deal with this thing or that thing. They have, in a way, lost faith in her, but they're sort of sparing her feelings by not saying that to her. That no one wants to believe it, but it's kind of the actions of everyone else are definitely saying that to her. And how hurt Korra is by the fact that Tenzin seems to have lost faith in her as well is it's really like powerful to see that scene play out, because Tenzin's always been the one to support her, and now there's an element of he's holding back with her, and that's it's sad to see, but it prompts Korra's need to, you know, drastically confront her problems, and she just comes out and says it here, that the problem is that she's afraid of Zaheer. Every time she tries to meditate in the spirit world, she just thinks of Zaheer and what he did to her. And I don't mind this. I think, like, isolated, what this episode tackles is perfectly fine. Her fear of Zaheer, she gets past that by confronting him. He helps her meditate in the spirit world, and she regains her spirituality. The problem is she has the avatar state already. We've seen her use it. The avatar state is Rava. It is using some element of Rava's power. That's the only way it's explained from beginnings. So how is the recovery process here leading to her reconnecting with Rava, but she's already got the avatar state back? It's so confusing just because of that, in that, is this episode actually trying to make this, to me, what would be a big reveal, that the avatar state and Rava are actually two separate things? And especially at this point in time where Korra is the only avatar, I find that really difficult to get behind. I perhaps could if she still had the past lives, and that's saying, like, okay, the memories of the past lives are in a way separate to just Rava incorporating her power into Korra. But as it is right now, it just feels very weird in that you're creating this weird separation in Rava, that, like, Korra can harness the power of Rava, but she can't communicate with Rava. And especially the fact that so many characters say that, like, oh yeah, the avatar spirit hasn't been, like, the energy hasn't been sensed in the spirit world in years. And it's like, is that just because Korra hasn't been in the spirit world, or what's going on here? Are they trying to, like, imply that even if Korra's in the physical world, Rava's, like, presence is always in the spirit world to a degree? Or what? Because it's weird that Korra has to meditate into the spirit world to, like, connect with Rava at all. And I think there's so much confusion about what exactly is happening here that it really does take just a little bit away from the arc, because everything else that's been technical in, like, book 2 especially has been somewhat easy to understand. Janora's astral projection technique, the book 2 finale, you can get behind all of that stuff because they explain it well enough. This feels like one of the most complicated things that we've seen so far. The progress that she makes here, because they just don't really attempt to explain it. And I really don't have an answer, because I feel at that point you're getting so technical. I can't believe the writers were aiming for it to be as technical as, like, you can sort of make it. With the whole avatar state Rava separation. Like, I don't mind the sort of dual stage recovery, but what she sort of unlocks out of it feels weird to me, in that, in a way, what you should have taken from this is just Korra's kind of confidence coming back. I think should have been more of the focus here, rather than just, like, okay, she unlocks Rava again, and there was this spiritual block in place, and it's like, okay, but how does this change Korra? How did this suddenly make her 100% again? In that, like, the problem in the previous, like, fight with Kuvira was that she was sort of slow. That it felt like there was still a physical issue, but now they're saying there's a spiritual issue. And I get there's sort of a mesh between the two, that one can affect the other. I think it just gets too detail focused when they're not giving enough details. It's a confusing statement I just made, but I think that's the way to interpret it, as, like, I love the details when they get into them here. The problem is that they make this about the details but never actually explain what those details are. I can accept it for what it is. I don't, like, need it to have every single explanation, but it's always been a frustration for me with this otherwise, like, amazing arc. I think the rest of this episode is executed perfectly. I love the scene with Zaheer. It's just what it accomplished from it just feels like can someone please explain this to me? Like, what are the details going on here? So yeah, she asked to meet with Zaheer. He's being held in a kind of prison in the mountains outside the city, and Mako goes with her. Which again, I think ultimately, if they had known that they could do Korrasami a bit clearer than they like initially thought, they probably would have had Asami go here. But I think it still ends up being a bit of a weakness that like clear-cut opportunity to do it here, because while I appreciate it from just the perspective of like, okay, Maka's there with her, like her like closest friend in a way, because they continue that friendship on after their relationship ends, it makes sense that he'd go with her. It's just, if you have been subtly setting up Korrasami in the background, this is like Korra's big moment, this book, in a way. Why isn't the person who's apparently been closest to her the past like 3 years, why isn't she there with her? So it's this weird thing where like, okay, I like that they give Mako this moment. It's just Asami's the one who needs the development. But either way, she goes in on her own, immediately just kind of confronts him. I'm not afraid of you anymore. He kind of moves at her until the change stop him, and she's terrified of him. And immediately the problem is still present. How does she move past this? And she's borderline on the verge of kind of like breaking down. She's like, I'm never going to get back to the way I was. Like, she really kind of goes at him like, you ruined me. I think I'm going to just have to accept that I'll never be the Avatar I was before. And Zaheer, his approach here is interesting in that he basically just kind of notes how like her own view of herself is sort of what's bringing her down. That you think your powers have limits, but I think they're like limitless. That there is no limit to your power. Like, you're afraid of what happened to you, but what happened to you is that you survived being poisoned when anyone else would have been killed. That is like shows incredible power, incredible strength, and the fact that you can't see that, like, what's the problem there? Then they get to the issue of like, you can't go into the spirit world, and there's this contrast between them that's clearly evident here. Why she's so frustrated at this is that here's Zaheer, bound up in prison, like away from his freedom, which he loves so much. And he's able to go into the spirit world no problem. But she, who is like the Avatar, the hero, has done all this stuff, has gone through so much to recover, finish her recovery, help everyone. She can't. Why can this villain do it but she can't? And the fact that she has to go to him for help, the person that she's feared for all of these years, who's kind of kept her down, put her in this position, he is the one who has to like help her on her last stage of recovery. It's this like ironic thing in a way, but it's also somewhat fitting that she has to really, accept help from him on this kind of spiritual front, and he guides her into the spirit world. And I like the simplicity of the recovery process in that it's the both of them kind of spiritually projected into like a flashback of the Korra being kind of suffocated. And literally all it is she has to let the scene play out and see that the result of it is the result of this is not that like she was hurt necessarily or anything like that. The result is she survived. She beats Zaheer after this happened. She stopped him and has recovered since. It has taken a long time to get there, but that she survived this ordeal. And she should be stronger in a way from it, having gone through so much. And that's the sort of acceptance that she has to have from this. That, yeah, you won't be able to forget what's happened to you, but, the fact that you've got through this should allow you to sort of grow as a person and realize kind of all of that. And that's what they sort of get at in like the final episode, that through all the suffering that Korra has went through, she's kind of learned to, in a way, become the kind of complete Avatar that she needs to be by the end of the series. That she knows what suffering is and kind of knows more kind of how to help people and stuff like that. That in a way this is meant to be like Aang knows the suffering of others because he's been through the genocide. And it's sort of what like Yang Chen gets at in like Escape from the Spirit World, that like why the Avatar is a human is because they have to go through all of these emotions, so they understand who they're trying to help by bringing balance, and this is sort of Korra's like experiencing of suffering, and because of that she could be more kind of empathetic going forward. Like it's obviously like a tough lesson, the fact that she has to, you know, get injured so badly, but the idea of this, of just like she has this massive growth from what's happened, I think works. So I think it's a good scene of just, again, the simplicity of him just telling her, continue to watch this. You don't die here. Don't linger on the pain of this moment, on like what could have been. Just look at what happened. This was 3 years ago. Look at where you are now. You're back, and you have to push past this. And just as she in a way considers herself like hitting the ground and dying at that moment almost. That's her interpretation of this. This is what ruins her. But the vision shows her crashing through the ground, and it all morphs into the spirit world, and she's back in, reconnects with Rava, saves everyone, with the idea that, you know, you're at your most powerful in the spirit world, which is sort of meant to set up the kind of finale of the conflict with Kuvira, where they end up in the spirit world, and here's suddenly Korra at her most powerful, and Kuvira in a way utterly helpless here in the spirit world, not knowing what to do. She's been the one who's angered the spirits, and she's helpless at what's happening. It's good. I think it is just, in my mind, a little let down by the confusion about what exactly is happening here. I like it because I love getting to hear Rava talk. I love that you've actually like given a character, a personality to the Avatar spirit. It just feels overly complicated what they've done here. And I wouldn't mind it if there was an explanation, but I think the problem is that there isn't really an explanation given, and anything that you sort of try to come up with is just kind of like, is that the way it's meant to be interpreted? I think it's fine, and her recovery arc is overall very good. The shock of ending book 3 the way they did, starting it with her missing, episode 2, Korra alone, tracking where she's been, the shock of like discovering the decisions that she's made, Toph helping her through the recovery, the Air Kids finding her, you know, her making that first step of the recovery, the shock that she's not fully healed at the loss to Kuvira, and then this episode. I think across all of those episodes it works overall really, really well. I think it's just a case of like they sort of hit that final hurdle. They don't like fall at the final hurdle and it fails, but it's just like they hit it and it's not as fluid as it could have been. And this could have been, I think, potentially the best character arc in Avatar if they had the specifics on what was going on here right. And that's how good I actually think it is. I think you just do have to be a little bit critical of some of the confusion that happened here. Similarly with the whole Jinora thing, I get that they wanted to have Jinora come out and, like they kind of did in book 2, have her say like, oh, Korra saved the world, Korra saved me, and that be the thing that like shows Tenzin that she's back, that he was wrong to doubt her, but he was right to give her this kind of the trust that she would get what she needed to from Zaheer without anything bad happening. But I don't like that they had to do what they did to Jinora in this episode to get her to that point. Because again, it's a case of like, she's meant to be in a relationship with Kai. Where's Kai in all of this? Like, he's just disappeared as a character. He's meant to be in a relationship with Jinora. Jinora is meant to be a master airbender, but there's very few scenes that really feel that way. And it just, to me, is a little bit overly frustrating to be present in this episode. But as I said, otherwise, the Opal Bolin stuff I think is solid setup for their relationship recovery. Great setup for the next episode. All the other like setup for the finale is quite good. And we're obviously building into the last couple of episodes here. So, very, very good episode. Just little things bring it down. But in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this episode. But yeah, thanks for watching, and bye.